So welcome.
Thank you.
I've never done this before, but you are a podcast pro, so I am excited to have you, but also I'm so excited to start this with 3 grounding breaths. So we can just start. Inhale through the nose. Exhale. One more. Exhale. One more inhale. Exhale. And that was beautiful. I've never kind of put my yoga teacher hat on in the studio yet.
I used to always do this when I would begin a podcast, regardless of what the guest's background was. Just felt like it was such an intentional approach to the conversation. And I really felt like it would help guide this organic flow of language, and whatever message was meant to be cultivated in the conversation would come through, because we were being so grounded and intentional.
That's so beautiful. So beautiful. Well, I'm so happy to have you here. Thank you so much for doing this.
Thank you for having me.
I have Sara Starkoff Green here, wellness consultant at the Marcus Institute of Integrative Health at FAU College of Medicine, founder of Greenhouse Wellness, and host of the Menopause Playbook. So honored. So before we get into what you've built, I'd love to know what pulled you towards wellness as the thing you wanted to organize your work around.
Thank you. Well, thank you so much for having me, and thank you for that kind introduction. And I'm equally honored to be here. You know that I really love our connection and the many ways that our worlds have intersected since we've met. So very happy to be here as well. I am asked this question quite often, and so I reflect back on my childhood and my own development and what my relationship was like with movement and with food and with my body and the world around me. And, for me, it's very much been a journey, both personally and professionally. And when I think about the aha moment, if you will, it was absolutely during the pregnancy of my second daughter. So my first daughter, thankfully, I had a very healthy pregnancy. And when it was time to give birth, I was so excited to meet her. And I was cared for by a midwife in a very traditional OBGYN practice and was delivering in a hospital setting. But I very much heeded their advice. Like, there was a due date. And so if the due date approaches and the body hasn't already gone into labor, then, automatically there's medical intervention. And I followed what everyone said, and I very, very nearly, and we'll save that for another episode, but I very nearly ended up in the OR with a C-section. And thankfully, literally in the last hour, my body cooperated and I was able to have a vaginal birth. And everyone was healthy, myself, my daughter. But it wasn't without intervention, and it wasn't without almost ending up in the OR. So fast forward 2 years later, and I'm pregnant with our second daughter. And at this point in time, I had, adopted a very regular yoga practice, and I ran all the time, and I worked out, and I was very mindful and intentional about the food that I ate and my own spiritual practice. And so I really had just evolved. And through that pregnancy, I decided I very much wanted to have a natural childbirth. And when I say natural, not without the safety and security of a hospital setting, but I really felt like I had cultivated this very powerful mind-body connection. And I felt that could support me through that process. And thankfully, that, along with the support of my midwife and my husband, I was able to have a natural childbirth in that safety of a hospital setting. And for me, not only was my daughter born that day, but also was this innate, inherent knowing that the mind and the body will work synergistically if we allow it to, and if we harness the tools required to make that happen.
That is so impactful, and also kind of the moment or the aha moment that made you realize this is essentially like the most visceral thing a woman can go through.
Yes. And so for me, circling back to your question, like what, kind of drove the direction of my professional interests and my career is that I think that through that process and understanding the mind-body connection, I was so drawn to disease prevention, disease management, proactive health, longevity, the pursuit of health span, because I felt like if I could educate and inspire individuals to harness that mind-body relationship, and it's a lifelong journey, right? I'm still working on the mind-body connection,
Yeah.
right? If I could do that, then I felt like I could really create change, like tangible change in like human form,
Absolutely. And when you talk about the mind-body connection leading up to the birth of your second daughter, like what do you think that connection was built of in that moment?
I think it was built over time. And I think it was a lot of yoga, a lot of meditation, a lot of physical movement, right? I think also like after a woman carries a baby and their body changes so much physically, you can't help but wonder and explore and understand what happens internally and externally to the physical body. And so I think that all of that, the physical coupled with the emotional, the mental, the spiritual, was really the foundation for that.
Wow, that's incredible. And it's also just so impactful and inspiring that in such a monumental moment in your personal life, that became something foundational to build your personal and professional relationship to wellness on.
Yes, absolutely. And she's 17 and a half years old now. So this was, nearly 18 years ago. And from, those moments until now, that journey has not been linear, right?
Yeah.
It ebbs, it flows, it expands, it regresses, right? And I think the thing that has kept me so pulled to that path personally and professionally is that I believe that our health and our ability to move our bodies and use our minds is such a privilege, and it's also a responsibility.
Yep.
And so when you think about how many people on this planet don't have those gifts, it feels disgraceful not to hold those to such high respect and to pursue the optimal level of both of those things.
I love that so much. And so that mentality, how does that resonate for you in your personal life? Like, how do you manage the ebbs and the flows of that mind-body connection and your dedication towards not only like physical performance, but maintaining a really amazing mental state and that gratitude?
Yeah. I mean, I think that's an important question because as, wellness professionals, so many people look to us for those answers.
Yeah.
And I think a big part of the answer is in the honest and authentic and transparent view that not every day is perfect, right? And for me, I think one of the greatest gifts that I've given myself on this journey is the gift of grace. And sometimes that looks like grace that I allow my body to move more slowly or more gently. Sometimes that means giving myself grace to take a mental break, right? Or giving myself grace because I don't feel as emotionally, intelligent in a moment, right? That I am, even though I aspire very much to be responsive rather than reactive, I'm still human, right?
Yeah.
And so giving myself grace in those moments when I don't show up quite as perfectly as I hope to.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And so professionally, what did that look like for you in terms of like even taking the first steps after you had your second daughter and you realized that you kind of had a mission that you wanted to amplify in the world?
Yes. I always knew that I wanted to balance work and motherhood.
Mm-hmm.
It just looks different in different seasons of my life. And when my girls were first born and they were much younger, like I was very solely focused on motherhood. But I knew that there would be a season to focus more on other things, right? Especially like the professional endeavors. And I think that in terms of the professional piece, I felt like I had something really important to share. And I feel like I'm very comfortable in front of an audience, but I'm also very comfortable like in this setting one-to-one. And so I feel like I have this gift of being able to share some wisdom and some very, raw, real life experiences. And I work very diligently on being a respectful listener. That's something being a podcast host actually has taught me a lot, is how to be an active and respectful listener rather than thinking about the next thing I'm going to say, right?
And that's very difficult.
Yeah. But I think that I just felt like I had something really important to share. And I felt like I could do that in an educational format in a lot of different platforms. So, that looked like group fitness instruction, that looked like one-to-one coaching, that looked like integrative nutrition consulting, that looked like, so many different things. And so I say I'm like a lifelong learner. I literally try every single day to learn something. And I do that for myself because I crave that. And I do it because I want to be able to offer that information to whoever I'm in front of, whether it's an audience, whether it's someone in the grocery store that strikes up conversation, whether it's sitting here as a guest on a podcast. Like, I want to be able to serve as a vessel of accurate information around all things health and wellness. And clearly not one person can be an expert on everything, right?
No.
I gravitate towards the things that interest me, which are movement, neuroplasticity, nutrition, mindfulness. Obviously, my podcast is centered around perimenopause and menopause, so hormone health. But yeah, I mean, I think that isn't that one of the greatest exchanges in a lifetime is interfacing with humans and being open to learning things from one another?
Yeah, for sure. I would agree with that. And I mean, you mentioned your podcast, so I'd love to dive into that. You're the host of the Menopause Playbook. And so I'd love to know how that came about and why hormone health is something that you're so passionate about diving deeper into and sharing wisdom about.
Sure. So at surface level,
Yeah.
I recognize this really critical gap in the conversation around perimenopause and menopause. Working as the wellness consultant at the Marcus Institute of Integrative Health and in all the other work that I do, it was coming up on a daily basis, the conversation and content around hormone health and hormone imbalance and women's health and perimenopause and menopause. And what I recognized was that all of this information, all of this content, particularly the content that we're consuming on social media, is by women and for women. And what I recognized as that gap was that we were leaving men out of the conversation. And I don't think that's fair.
Yeah.
Because regardless of whether a woman has a male partner in a romantic sense, right? They have men in their lives. They have brothers, friends, fathers, work colleagues. And I feel like if we can include men in the conversation, if we can educate them, if we can inspire them, and if we can let them know that having them as allies during this very natural biological phase, we all kind of win, right? Because when we can all understand what's going on more thoroughly and more accurately, then the byproduct of that is compassion and understanding. So that's really where, the Menopause Playbook was born from.
That's amazing. And in diving into that podcast and learning so much and amplifying the voices of men and educating men, what have you noticed starting to shift in the conversations that are maybe coming up for you at the Marcus Institute?
So I think what I'm seeing across the landscape of hormone health and women's health is that it's twofold, really. One is that there's a lot more visibility and acceptance and conversation around women's health issues than there ever was before, right? So I think that everyone, men and women alike, are becoming more comfortable talking about those topics. And then I always say two things can be true at once. And the other piece of that is that science and medicine knows more now than we've ever known before.
Yeah.
We understand biologically what's happening to women better than we ever have.
Yeah.
So you take the intersection of, a cultural shift where people are more comfortable talking about these things, and you couple that with, the most abundant amount of modern science and medicine information and data that we've ever had. And, how can you ignore such an important topic?
Yeah. And when it comes to educating yourself about menopause, whether it is a man or a woman, like, what is the motivator for that? Because I feel like menopause is something that if you're a woman, let's say in your 20s, 30s, or 40s, it's very easy to think, okay, I'll deal with that when it comes. And we don't talk about our hormone health in a way that seems caring and gracious and loving. We kind of just look at it as this thing we maybe need to take care of, or it's kind of looming in the background. And for men, I imagine it's like a very easy topic to never come across.
Right. Yes. Well, I think that a few things have come to light in the podcast, journey for me. And one of those things is that the symptoms of perimenopause and menopause are so vast and wide and diverse among women. So no two women experience that phase completely the same.
Yeah.
And I think that's really important to acknowledge and understand so that men also can understand, that unusual symptoms or hearing one person's story that doesn't align with maybe, what they're seeing in front of them from the woman in their life doesn't mean that, her truths are somehow not true or invalid, right? That the symptoms really span such a vast spectrum. And the other piece is that we have recognized now that, hormone imbalance, that those symptoms begin to show for some women as early as their 20s.
Wow.
And there's so many factors that impact that, right? Like environmental factors, autoimmunes, genetics. There's so many. And truthfully, like that's a whole nother conversation. But I think that if we can understand that, hormone imbalance, and interestingly, I want to make sure I point this out too, because this comes up on my podcast a lot, is that many women who are navigating perimenopause during, late 30s, early to late 40s, even early 50s, they often are dealing with men in their lives who are also going through some of these hormone shifts, right?
Wow.
And so you take, especially in a romantic relationship, right? You have two partners that might be navigating this at the same time, and that can cause a lot of confusion. It can cause a lot of disconnection. And so the purpose behind the podcast, of course, is to educate, to inspire, but the byproduct that I hope to create is compassion and understanding.
That's so amazing. I think it's so interesting. I mean, obviously, I listened to your podcast and you have incredible experts coming on there. And you talked about making sure that we do source information from credible experts and essentially like the right sources. And I think that that's such a big topic today, and I don't want to veer away from the conversation on menopause because I do want to dive deeper, but especially with something that arguably has kind of been quiet in the discourse for a long time and only recently has come to the forefront as a topic that is discussed. Finding the right sources and educating yourself in a way that you can stand behind is so important. And we're not educated foundationally in our schooling in the U.S. on health experiences and changes that we all undergo as humans. And to make sure that those sources that we have to seek out on our own at later points in life are credible is just so important, because a lot of people are going to social media and they're listening to influencers or people with loud voices on the internet who might be selling things, who might have ulterior motives, and that's not bad. It's just an understanding of where information is coming from.
I think you bring up a great point, and it really requires a very discerning perspective. It requires pressing pause and really diving in and doing the work in terms of the credibility of who you're listening to.
Yeah.
Right. And people often ask me like what my protocols are in terms of like supplements or if I take peptides and I am always a little vague in my answers on purpose because what works for me is not necessarily, going to work for the woman next to me.
Absolutely.
And so I feel like my role as a wellness professional is to introduce so many different tools and modalities and then, encourage people to seek out professionals in their world, credible professionals to your point, to help guide them on their journey.
And from the perspective of a journey, like no matter what age you are listening to this podcast or gender, like what is the right or a conscientious approach to starting to educate yourself about menopause, or maybe for women setting themselves up to understand their bodies in a way so that they can go through it as optimally as possible?
I think that what's important is to kind of take a step back and to look at a much broader view of what optimizing one's own individual health and well-being looks like. And in integrative health, we use terminology like precision medicine, which is like very like customized precision to that individual's needs. And when I think about what that looks like in my own life, what I think about is my two daughters. My girls are 17 and 19, and they are very, very interested in physical movement and exercise and nutrition and hot and cold therapy and so many different tools and modalities and supplements and, you name it. And, I think what's so cool is that like that generation they're really inquisitive. And I think that when we stay curious, right, that's where the profound and impactful knowledge is found.
Yeah, absolutely. But talking about curiosity and then kind of bringing in what you just mentioned about discernment, like how do you refine that discernment and how do you understand what might be the right source or what might be the right doctor or what might be the right supplement for you in a world that's just like so loud?
Right. Well, you mentioned a few moments ago about, like scrolling on social media and people, like anyone that wants to have a voice on social media can, right? Like Instagram is not asking for your credentials to create a profile, right?
No.
You can call yourself whatever you want. You can link whatever you want, right? I mean, that is not what they're really monitoring, right? So, I think that even down to something as simple as like, when those ads are popping up on your social media feeds for this supplement or this tool or this is like just like teaching yourself to press pause.
Yes. And pressing pause is so powerful. I mean, right back to where we started. I had never done that before when I started a podcast. And obviously I know the value of that in terms of like my yoga teacher training and guiding people through classes all the time. But taking that pause in moments where you feel like the temperature starting to rise or the dopamine starting to come on and understanding that discernment is such an amazing tool that we have at our disposal. But if we don't refine it and we don't hone it, then it's not doing anything for us. It's there for a reason. And I mean, it's funny because I feel like growing up, a label that was put on me a lot was picky. And when you're a kid, you don't know if that's good or bad. And the older I get and the longer that stays with me, the more I realize, oh, this is a strength. That's not a weakness.
I love that.
Yeah. So when it comes to, I mean, based on what you've learned in your podcast, interviewing all these experts, what would you say are the best ways to approach menopause or treat menopause, whether you're going through it or whether you're not?
Well, a few things. First of all, I'll say that the podcast is just such like a small piece of the, entirety of what I do in the health and wellness
Yes.
world, right? And so I don't want us to get like so laser focused on just that one women's health topic, because I think, the message that I'd like to share today is the idea of like harnessing the best version of yourself in mind and in body. And I think that if that becomes the intention, if that becomes the goal, and we understand and practice the action steps behind that goal, right? Then I think you can apply that to anything.
Yeah.
You can apply it to men's health. You can apply it to an autoimmune. You can apply it to a learning disability. You can apply it to so many different facets of life. And so I think really that fundamentally is where the answers lie.
That is amazing. So in your role for the Marcus Institute, you plan 200 plus events a year. And what does it mean for you to be the facilitator for events like this that enhance the well-being of the people that exist in that community?
What I love about my role at the Marcus Institute is that we are a grant-funded program. And so the Marcus Institute of Integrative Health in Boca is twofold. We have a clinical practice, which is integrative medicine, and then we have a community wellness program. And so my role is in curating and managing and running the community wellness program. And the grant funds that we have allow us to keep all of our classes free to the community and still pay our instructors fair market value.
Yeah.
And so I feel like it's such a privilege to be able to facilitate. I get to go out into the community, identify and source talent and experts in so many different areas, from physical movement to, meditation to we're doing an art for wellness class with a certified art therapist. I mean, because people learn and people heal on so many different planes.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? So I feel like it's so meaningful to me. And when I hear people give feedback, like the community that we've created there, and, community is a huge piece of health and healing.
I second that, like, to a T. I have learned over the course of my life that if I'm not feeling grounded in community, there is a huge piece of the puzzle missing for me. And it's not something that you can fill with anything else. Mm-hmm. Feeling like you belong and you walk into wherever that community gathers and that you have impact and that you matter and that you belong there is the most human, like, evolutionary feeling.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Yeah. So you create that community for people, which is such a beautiful thing.
Well, I'd like to say that, maybe I create the foundation, but they are the core of it, right? Mm-hmm. Like each individual person and each instructor, the exchange, the energy exchange, the interactions, that is what is built in those rooms, right?
Yeah.
And so I often tell people, like, I can't just choose instructors that have the letters behind their names or have, like, certain certifications or specializations. I am so particular in my vetting process because what is equally, if not more important to me than their professional accreditation, which is, of course, very, very important, is their energy and their demeanor and the way that they interface with the clients. Because creating a welcoming, warm, inclusive environment is what I think makes our community at Marcus so special.
Wow. You can't manufacture that. That is something that is naturally evolving and that's naturally produced. And when it comes to Greenhouse, how did that get started, and what kind of container is that? Like, what kind of consulting services are you providing through Greenhouse?
So I offer quite an array, actually. I do a lot of keynote speaking, a lot of education. So whether that's, oftentimes corporate wellness. So many times, I'm brought into a corporate or a nonprofit or an educational institution where I'm asked to curate a workshop or a presentation for their employees or their clients or their audience. And, that can be anything from, one of my favorite topics are the blue zones. And we talk about longevity and health span, and everyone's interested in that. And I want to just clarify that, the goal is not, to increase the number of years that we live. The goal, and that's longevity, which is just chronological age. But what we really want to be in the pursuit of is the pursuit of health span.
Yeah.
And health span is, for those that don't understand that terminology, health span is the number of years that we live free of disease, free of pain, free of discomfort, right? In optimal health. So that's a really I want to say it's like a trendy topic, but I hope it's not, something that fizzles out, because I think it is the way of the future. Everything from movement to nutrition to mindfulness, and those are all really, really, big topics for me. And then I do a lot of one-to-one. So I work with a lot of couples, actually. And what's interesting is usually I would say, I don't have the data in front of me, but usually it's the woman in a relationship will come to me, and whether it's because she wants to lose some weight or she needs accountability or she needs some motivation, and then not too long after, she's able to encourage her partner to join us. And whether that's because she's leading by example, right? Like a partner sees that she's having success and then becomes more open-minded to it. I do a lot of what I call a couples masterclass, and I love that. And I'm able to serve clients all over the country because I can do that virtually. I mean, I think that was one of the, blessings of COVID, is we learned, how we could connect with humans over technology. Nothing replaces what we're doing here, sitting, sharing physical space, of course. But I think that it's added value. So those are a lot of what takes up my time, and a lot of what I really get great joy from.
That's so amazing. It's just like the tapestry that you've been able to build to honor what you believe to be your mission and spread what you've learned is so dynamic.
Yeah, thank you for that.
I mean, as far as like being dynamic, I kind of think just going into like the more personal side of things, like especially for women, and obviously my view is skewed because I am a woman, but especially for women, we have to have so many pillars of our health taken care of to a certain extent to feel like we are the picture of health, right? Like to identify as someone who is well or healthy, we have to fill so many cups that we need essentially to get to that place. And for you, what does that look like?
I think for me, a big piece of that has been honoring my own health and well-being, and understanding that there is no way, and it sounds so cliche, but it's true, there's no way to pour from an empty cup.
Yeah.
And so prioritizing without shame, without guilt, my own health and well-being.
Yeah.
And, you see me in class often.
Literally, that was the picture in my mind. And for anyone who doesn't come to my classes at Yoga Joint, I tend to teach quite early.
Yes.
6 a.m., 7 a.m., that is my specialty.
That's my jam. I actually am working on a whole piece for my social media right now about the magic of the mornings. Because I just think the mornings are the most magical time.
Same.
So I love those early morning classes. But yes, I mean, prioritizing, carving out time. I think it's really important to connect with loved ones, family, friends. I love connecting with other women, making time for those connections. I'm a big believer in like the importance of like just my husband and my 2 girls and myself, like having, a family dinner like on Sunday nights, like that grounds us for the week ahead. And I think it's so important to, come together in the kitchen. We all love food. We all love preparing food. We love being in each other's space and, sitting down together. I think it's important to make the time for that, because we live in this world where we value productivity and busyness, and it's almost like a badge of honor to be like, exhausted and burnt out, because that means that you're so successful and so productive. And I just have really made a conscious effort the last few years to not subscribe to that mentality. Like, I know that I'm successful and I can measure that in so many ways. And I don't just mean with my work. I mean, with my personal relationships and with my own, self. And so I want to live healthfully.
Yeah.
For, as long as I can.
Yeah.
And so that means I have to rest and I have to recover and I have to, slow down. And for someone like myself who really loves productivity and I love being in movement, that has been a challenge.
Yeah. That resonates with me because I used to equate being busy from very early hours of the morning until the second I would get into bed with success.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I thought it would look like.
Mm-hmm.
And when I had lived in that way for years and years and years, and my system was filled with cortisol,
Mm-hmm.
and I was always trying to catch up. I was never felt like I was level and had everything taken care of, for example, starting a week on a Monday.
Mm-hmm.
It affects you so deeply. And maybe going through a pandemic had something to do with that because the world literally shut down and we
Yes.
all had to slow down.
We did.
And that was a huge turning point for me.
Mm-hmm.
But I think understanding that rest, recovery, and those intangible moments where you're creating memories for yourself with the people that you love,
Mm-hmm.
or through an experience, like that is you can't put a price on that. That is invaluable. And as hard as we push and as busy as we are, the rest has to come so that in a health context, like if you're pushing hard, you need the rest to actually let your
Recover
body
on a cellular level. I was just
Absolutely.
having that conversation with other women this morning. I'm like, if we're not prioritizing, and I always talk about, it's not just quantity of sleep, right? It's quality of sleep. So we talk
Absolutely.
about sleep architecture and, the idea that like, if you're going to push, right, which is a good thing, if you're going to ask a lot of your physical body, whether that's in a workout or, in productivity at work, you have to allow the body to recover.
Yeah. And it kind of, duality in yoga is such a big topic. It is basically, that's what yoga means, union or to yoke. So duality is something that's ripe in the practice. And when you talk about pushing forward and you talk about rest, like the more you push, the more you understand your rest.
Mm-hmm.
And the more you get to know your body and the more you get to know the signs that you need to rest and how much rest is appropriate and how replenishing that is for the next time you are ready to push. And I used to equate rest with something I would feel guilty about or had to explain or be shameful towards. And now with intention and integrity in making choices to do one or the other, you come to appreciate whatever moment you tend to be in.
Mm-hmm.
And like, it's even funny, and, I did it this morning, like, there are pockets of time I create for people after a big push, even in a 45-minute class, that I think are important. And it doesn't mean that you're not doing the most. It just means that you're creating that little microcosm of space for you to take on whatever is about to come next.
Absolutely. I love that. I actually love that you do that. I mean, you'll give us like, 10 breath cycles instead of, 3. And it's like, it's not wasted time. It's useful time. You said something a few minutes ago, and I just want to make sure that, I respond to that because when I think about your listeners' takeaways from this, right? So you mentioned like your elevated cortisol, right? And that cortisol alone could be just a huge conversation. And for anyone listening, that's our stress hormone. And, you can measure that through blood work, right? If you look, I guess it depends on what everyone's feed shows, but like there is a push on social media for cortisol gummies or cortisol supplements. And I'm not saying that there's not a place for supplementation because of course there is, right? But what I would like to educate listeners with is that, when we talked about earlier being discerning, right? Instead of reaching for the easiest fix, right? The answer to elevated cortisol in its most natural form is regulating the nervous system.
Yes.
And so if every human was walking around in the world with a tool or tools to regulate their central nervous system, to understand how to activate their parasympathetic system, to push themselves into a rest and digest, rather to be living and existing in this fight or flight, then maybe we wouldn't need cortisol gummies at all, right?
Yes.
And so, and I'm not bashing that. I mean, I love supplementation and vitamins and even gummies when needed. I have plenty of clients that I work with that can't swallow a pill. And so they need a gummy form and whatever. So I'm not bashing any of that stuff. I just want to make sure that listeners understand that at the foundation of that, our bodies want to be in a synchronistic state of homeostasis and balance, right? That's where the body wants to live and exist. But it's all these things that we do to our bodies and all of these external factors that push us out of that state of balance. And so the repercussion, the impact, right? The medical concern that comes from that is an example of that is elevated cortisol, among many other things, right? But I just wanted to make sure that, the answer is not necessarily to buy whatever's being sold on your feed. The answer might be as simple as adopting a breathwork practice or going to a guided meditation and incorporating some completely free and independently available tools to regulate.
Well, to touch upon even that inclination towards being busy, right? We drown out all the signals our body gives to us. And that's just a nature of the society that we live in, right? All these things that we do and we're so busy with, they're loud. They're externally driven. You have a deadline or you're in traffic and you have to get somewhere, or you have to make sure that you're prepping X, Y, and Z when you get home so that the next day is you're ready for it. And where are those pockets of time where you can get quiet and listen? Because regulating your nervous system is a very subtle, silent process. And I mean, I don't think I had any idea what that meant until a few years ago. So that conversation is starting to get very buzzy, regulating the nervous system. And it hopefully will be something that is incorporated into what we consider a total health picture as time goes on. But what that looks like and what people understand about the components to regulating the nervous system, I think is just the education needs to be there, because you and I know what breath work is. We know what that means to regulate a nervous system. But I think about myself in my 20s, and I remember my grandmother always used to say, you have to do yoga breathing. And I took yoga and I was like, I wouldn't really even know what to do if I tried, and how is that going to affect my system? But the impact of breath work is exponential, and the impact of going for a walk with no phone, exponential. The impact of putting your phone on Do Not Disturb, the impact of not exposing yourself to people who may not have your best interests at heart and who you don't feel safe around, also regulating to the nervous system. And we make choices that are so not intentional, and we think that our lives dictate them for us, where we have the power to make changes that honor who we are on the inside and how we approach life and the energy we want to bring to it, because energetics is also a huge thing. We don't see it. People don't understand what that means, and I didn't understand what that meant. I'm very sensitive to energies, and I've learned that the hard way. And harnessing energy in a class was a huge part of my education, and it's not something that anyone can teach you. Because as the teacher, I can sense when people are starting to get really, really tired. I can sense when someone comes in or people come in and the energy is really distracted, and I have to pull it into a different space where people are present and focused. And that is on a large scale, whereas, you could have come in with an energy that is very different to what I'm bringing, or vice versa, and how to work with that and how to understand is also a huge part of it too. And your nervous system plays a huge role in how you show up and the energy you bring.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And so when it comes to these energetics and regulating your nervous system, I mean, you mentioned spending time with your family, but to me, when I see you come into class, there is such an effervescent glow coming off of you. And I'm not just talking about like aesthetics. It comes from inside. It's not something that I could give you a recipe for. But what do you think are those practices that really like allow you to move through the world in that way where you are literally like gleaming?
Thank you for that. I love that that's how you see me. That's how I feel, you know? I wake up so excited for my day. I just like I love life, you know? And I've done a lot of work on myself. I've done a lot of personal development work. I've looked at my stuff. It's not always pretty, it's not always comfortable, you know, it's not always admirable, but you know, I just aspire so much to like learn and grow and evolve. And, you know, I was talking with someone the other day and like what came to mind, the words that came to mind is like, I love my own company. Like I really love, I mean, listen, I love being with other people and I love energy exchange. And I love, like we talked about earlier, group settings, one-on-one. But I also really like some time of solitude, you know? I drive in my car. Not all the time, but a lot of the time I drive in complete silence.
Jay Shetty talks about this because he does that too. And he says that his best ideas come to him in the car. And I truly believe that. And think about the times in your life when you are completely silent, it's so rare.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and I think that just, you know, the intention behind how we choose to show up, how we choose to operate in this world is so huge. And so much of it is what we do when no one's looking.
Yeah.
You know, a quote came across my world this week and it keeps showing up. And, you know, it's something to the effect of like consistency compounds quietly. And I love that.
I love that too.
And, you know, I'm very consistent in what I do, right? I'm a little rigid because it serves me. You know, I love structure and I really thrive on consistency. And, you know, I think that it's really a perfect time to bring up the idea of neuroplasticity in this conversation. You know, our minds will do what we do regularly the best, right? So what we do often and over again is what our mind wants to do. It's what it's comfortable doing. It's what it believes to be doing, right?
Yeah.
And so what do we choose to feed it, you know? And so if you have practices or thoughts that are negative or toxic, then that is what you're going to see come to fruition.
Yeah.
And conversely, right, if we feed our mind positivity and we have healthy, positive practices that serve the best version of ourselves and we do them regularly, then that's what's going to be the reality.
That is so true. It's so profound. And it's kind of like I took like a master class with Brian Kest, who is a very well-known, well-regarded yogi, and he was saying that exact thing. Essentially, like when you feed something, it grows, and when you starve something, it dies. And he was talking about our thoughts and essentially our malevolent thoughts as humans, because we're all addicted to them, and shifting towards benevolent thoughts. And the practice helps with that. But really, any regulation of the nervous system and quieting down will help with that. And just being conscientious of it.
Yeah. Being aware.
Yeah.
You know, one of the like most foundational things that I try to teach people is like stepping into the driver's seat of your life.
Which is a lot easier said than done.
It is. But so many people are walking around in this world so passively.
Absolutely.
And, you know, the minute that you make a decision to harness the direction of your life, like everything starts to change, you know? Yeah. And I think that when we talk about neuroplasticity, an important concept around neuroplasticity, it's not just the brain's ability to learn new things, but it's also the brain's ability to unlearn things.
Yeah.
And so what does that mean in the context of health and well-being? Well, what it means is that just because you might be locked into the repetitiveness of unhealthy behaviors and choices, it doesn't mean that that has to be where you continue to live, right? Like, you can change that. You have to do it consistently, and you have to do it for a period of time. And then eventually, right, the more positive, healthier choices become your default.
Yeah.
What we do the most is what persists.
Yeah, absolutely. But creating space to understand that that doesn't have to be the course you continue to follow.
Right.
If you want to change and you want to grow and you want to evolve, that
Yeah.
there's that expansive choice you can make to do that. And I think that that's so beautiful. And that goes along with that kind of like discernment and that
Yes.
awareness. Because when you understand the habits that might be reinforcing behaviors that you don't want to undertake, you have a choice to redirect. And that is also health, because something else, like you've alluded to it, it is such a moving target, especially as women. Things ebb and they flow, and we go through phases, and our hormones have a lot
Yes.
to do with that.
Yep.
And year to year, we're dealing with different challenges. Year to year, we're dealing with different concerns. And our brains have to go along for the ride in order to continue to put us in the driver's seat.
Yeah. Different seasons of our life have different demands on us.
Absolutely.
Right? And what we're able to prioritize, and even, even access to resources, right? Different seasons of our life give us different access to tools and resources. One of the things I talk about a lot is like building a very robust wellness toolbox. So like the tools that work for me today are different than what served me, say a year ago or 5 years ago, but I don't throw them out. I put them back in the toolbox because they may serve me again in the future, right? It's like riding a bike. Like once you've learned to use a tool, like you're not going to, forget that. You may get a little rusty, but you'll pick that tool up again. Even something like a meditation practice, right? Like it may be a little bit more difficult to be still when you come back to it, but doing it consistency, like we just spoke of the neuroplasticity, you'll get to a place where it becomes more natural feeling. And, I just think that it's so important when we talk about intentionality, like the content that we choose to consume, the people that we choose to share our energy with, right? Like the things that we choose to say yes to, right? I've become like very discerning in what I say yes to, both personally and professionally. Like people were just asking me, like I think everyone said this week, like, oh, to one another, like, what did you do over the holiday weekend? Or like, what did you do with your long weekend? Or did you have a fun weekend or relaxing or whatever? Which we don't want to lose sight of what the weekend was about, of course, like honoring our servicemen and women. Of course, that is why we have an extra day off of work on
for Memorial
Monday.
Day.
Right. But like my answer was that it was the perfect balance of like social engagement, rest, recovery. And so that is what I choose and that is what I prioritize. And I no longer feel guilty saying no to things. I know where my non-negotiable obligations are, right? I know what I need to do at work that I'm not allowed to say no to because it's part of my role, right? And I know the things that I need to do for my family, right? And for myself. But like there's so much that exists in a place of choice.
So much. I love that. And I think that that's kind of how I approach weekends as well. But it wasn't always, right? Like people ask you how your weekend was. What did you do? What do you have planned? And if you care about your health and you prioritize rest and you prioritize movement and you prioritize nutrition, that might look like very different to someone who doesn't have those goals. And that's okay too. But to also not let social pressure seep in to what you prioritize, which I also think is a huge component of maintaining that dedication and that consistency because health is so individual and personal, and we have gotten used to crowdsourcing it and having it be this movement we're all supposed to walk together. But you have to kind of rely on your individualism to honor who you are and what you need with your very specific profile, background, genetics, like risk factors, priorities, goals. It's going to be different than everyone. And the more comfortable I get in kind of standing alone in that, the stronger that muscle gets, essentially, right?
Absolutely.
I was out for dinner with my cousin last night, and she's a couple of years younger than me. And she was talking about some things that I had already gone through that were hard for me, but that kind of point to what I'm talking to, that individualism and understanding what's right for you and what's not right for you and how that's different than your peers. And really just getting the strength, building it up. You can stand on your own 2 feet and you're not looking over your shoulder. You are just so intently convicted in the choices that you make and how you choose to spend your time and what you choose to be intentional about.
Yes.
So,
Well, and I think that, it takes a lifetime
yes,
to cultivate that, to be comfortable in your decisions, in your intentions, and just not like seeking and needing external acceptance
Yes.
is so huge. There's like a saying that says like you're not everyone's cup of tea and that's okay.
and that's a good thing.
Yeah. And I love that because it's a good reminder, right? Like, not everyone is going to vibe with everyone, but like being a good human and, taking, positive, actionable steps towards being the best version of yourself. I feel like that's what's most important in this lifetime.
And that shines through, especially because like you just said, you can't pour from an empty cup.
Yep.
So I think that is just like so full circle. And it's not just a saying that people repeat. It truly, like, if you embody it and you treat yourself with the care and the love that you treat other people in your life, then you're going to show up as your best self. And that seeps into everything you touch.
Yeah.
And it's a gift to the people in your life as well, not only a gift to you.
Well, and I think also like, we're also inundated with all of this, images and experiences and like this just very like, fabricated like perception of how people are living on social media. And like what people don't often realize is like what those pictures are just a single moment, right? And they're probably staged. And, I just think it's important to remember like you need to intuitively listen to your own heart and your own mind and your own body. I often say like, first, our bodies will whisper, and we have a choice to hear the whisper. And if we don't respond to the whisper, then we get like a tap on the shoulder. And if we still don't respond and hear that, and heed that, then maybe we get like hit over the head, with the message, right? And so I really desire to like hear the whispers.
Yeah. That is so beautiful. I guess to kind of close this off, like what is one additional, because you've given us so many good little tidbits of information here about how you approach your life and how you have cultivated this beautiful, beautiful tapestry of like all of these pillars of health and wellness. What's like a mantra or a saying that you live your life by every day that's rung true for you?
I feel like I already shared a few good ones. I got to think about that. I really do wake up every morning with an immense amount of gratitude, right? Yeah. Because no one has a crystal ball, and there's so many things in this world that we do not have control over, right? And so I think that there's like a combination of good karma, of opportunity, right? And then the intersection of intention and practice and action, right? So I very, very humbly and gratefully recognize the beautiful life that I'm living. And while I'll take some credit because, I do work very diligently and consistently to create this life, my health, my well-being, my relationships, right? There's a lot of energy at play that I don't have control over.
Yeah.
And so when I say that like I only can take partial credit, like I acknowledge that there's all these moving parts and moving energies that impact the trajectory beyond just what I do.
Yeah.
So what I know is that I only have control over myself.
Yeah.
And, there's a very famous prayer that talks about like, and I won't recite it here, but talks about, acknowledging like what we do have control over, what we don't have control over, and then recognizing the difference between those two things. And I think for me, I recite that daily, and that's a really poignant reminder in terms of like how I want to live my life. And I think that has really impacted and cultivated the life that I'm living today.
That is so beautiful. Well, just to close off, where can people find you? Like Instagram, your podcast?
Yep. So on Instagram, Greenhouse Wellness Co. The Menopause Playbook is on Spotify and Apple or wherever you listen to your podcasts. And then if you want to connect with me professionally, either at the Marcus Institute of Integrative Health in Boca Raton or on my website, which is Greenhouse Wellness Consulting. So I'd love to connect, whether I can serve you or support you, in terms of your own journey of health and well-being, or, just have a conversation. I'm always looking to learn from others too. So feel free to reach out.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.